My name is Jaclyn Crupi and I'm an author. So my book is called Pasta Love, How to Make, Eat and Celebrate Pasta Like an Italian, and it's published by Affirm Press. There certainly are recipes in it, and it's a call to action to get people making pasta. That's very much what I want to do. But to me, it's a book about people and it's a book about love. And so I tried to fill it with both of those things and food traditions and ways we can keep those things going. So I was very lucky to have two wonderful nonne, very different women, but they both had a huge influence on me growing up. Of the two, Nonna Paolina, my maternal nonna, was more the cook, and the food came more from her and that side. But Nonna Vincentina, my paternal nonna, was also a wonderful cook. She lived next door to us. There was no fence between the two properties, so she was constantly in and out of our house, and we were constantly in and out of hers. And then I spent all school holidays with my other nonna and doing a lot of cooking and a lot of pasta making, of course. All of my work is trying to honour this generation of Italian migrants that my grandparents belonged to, the ones who came to Australia in the 50s and 60s. They were quite young when they did that. They left family behind. Post-war Italy was a very difficult place, and having done a lot of research into that, I see why they made this journey. But just thinking about how young they were, they often had young children in tow, how little they knew about the place they were going. I want to focus on that generation and honour them while we still have them around. So my nonne have all passed away, but there's still their contemporaries around. And I think what I've really come to realise is that everything that they taught me is more relevant now than ever. Their approach to life is almost timeless. And I think it's partly that they lived through a war, and so they just understood the important things in life and how to spend time and what matters and what doesn't. And I think also that the way they treated the earth and the world around them and people is sort of how I want to live my life. My first book was called Nonna Knows Best, and it was all about the wit and wisdom of the matriarchs, the nonne, and everything that they taught me about how to live life. And it came out right at the start of the pandemic, and I wrote it not knowing we were about to go into a pandemic, and it just became so immediately relevant because it was all about finding a way to make a meaningful life and enjoying life and focusing on important things. And I loved writing that book. And then it came out and people were, what's the next one going to be? And I didn't think there was one. But suddenly we're in the middle of a pandemic and friends and family are messaging me saying, how do I grow Swiss chard? How do I grow spinach? Because everyone was worried about food and our food systems. And I realised that my grandfathers had taught me how to garden. So I wrote Garden Like a Nonno, and I put all of their tips and tricks and ways of gardening that don't involve spending a lot of money, using chemicals. It's really common sense gardening that was their approach to life, and it was just so highly productive. They gardened fence to fence to fence to house, and there was no bare earth, and they produced a lot of food. The nonne in the book came to me in really interesting ways. It's quite a beautiful process. It was a beautiful process. So I started with two women who I've known my entire life, and they come from the region my nonna came from and then the region next door. And when they migrated to Australia, they actually lived with my grandparents until they were married. So they've been family friends for forever, and they've known me since I was born. And so I just called them up and said, can I come over and make some pasta with you? And I didn't know it was a book at this point. I just wanted to be making pasta with these women and seeing if I could find a way to tell their stories. And so I went over and I interviewed them and I took their photograph and we made pasta together. And it was this really gorgeous process. And as soon as I started doing it, I immediately understood what the book could be and that it could be a book and that I could be the person to write it. And so after I had made pasta with them, I still wasn't ready, though, to announce, I'm writing this book and, I need your nonna. So I just quietly told a few people and I would just mention it. And basically the Italian Whisper Network did the rest. My phone would ring and someone would say, I've got a nonna for you. And I had a few parameters. I needed them to be from different regions and making different shapes of pasta. So I got a lot of fettuccine nonnas, but I sort of had already covered that. And then, I wanted them from far north all the way to the south. And so, it took a little while to get that coverage that I wanted. But when I needed a nonna, the phone would ring and, there she was. I think what I immediately noted was just how young they were. I think that sort of stood out to me. Some were teens, some were in their early 20s. Many of them came alone. And I just found that so extraordinary, on a boat for 2 to 3 months, arriving in a place they didn't know, they didn't speak the language. But the story that really sticks in my mind is Amelia's story, where she is meant to sail to Queensland to meet her fiancé, who is cutting sugarcane, which was a very common thing for the men to come and do. And the boat docks in Melbourne, and lots of people disembark, but she doesn't because she's going to Queensland. And someone who she's met on board the boat says, "Someone's calling your name." And she said, "Who would be calling my name? I don't know anybody in Melbourne." And she looks out and there is her fiancé jumping up and down on sort of some crates, trying to get her attention to tell her to get off the boat because he's come to Melbourne early. And had she not noticed that, she would have arrived in Queensland alone. And so gratefully she did. She got off the boat and has been here ever since. They were very honest about their first impressions of Australia. And some of them were put into camps, and there were some really horrible conditions, especially around food in those places. But some of them arrived immediately and were so excited. It was suddenly they had jobs. All of them worked as machinists. That really was the work available to women at that time, and it was the skills that they brought with them. So my nonna helped many of these women get jobs as machinists. That was the work that she did in a factory. And every nonna I met and made pasta with, that was the work she ended up doing, at least initially on arrival in Australia. And they could find all the food easily, which I was surprised by. I sort of went in thinking, they're going to have had difficulty sourcing, all the ingredients for their sort of food traditions, and that certainly wasn't the case. So food wasn't so much a problem, but they did take a while to adapt to the lifestyle. One nonna told me, though, she had quite strict parents, and suddenly being away from them, being a young woman, she was free and she had a bit of money and she loved it. It just sort of went a bit wild, which I love the idea of, because it was just opportunities here that just did not exist in post-war Italy for any of them. So why they did it is really clear. And then some of them loved it, some of them hated it, some of them came to love it, some of them, struggle on today. But I think once they had their families in particular, and then their families were succeeding and having opportunities, they really have sort of embraced their lives here. But it is a tight-knit community as well. So they had each other, which I think really, really helped. The history of pasta is absolutely fascinating, and I really restrained myself from just writing a book about the history of pasta, because there are great books about the history of pasta, but it's contentious. Nobody agrees. The food historians don't agree, and the recorded version of things is really murky. But basically, they all sort of agree that it's 4th century BC. There was pasta. Italians were eating pasta, and what that was just a giant ball of flour and water dough that was either left to attract wild yeast and then be baked into bread, or was shaped and eaten as pasta. So as I learnt more about pasta and as I made pasta with more and more nonne, I wanted to go to experts sort of making pasta professionally. And so I started with Guy Grossi, who's a chef a famous Melbourne chef on Bourke Street. His restaurant, with many restaurants, are making pasta for people every single day. I know that he's as obsessed with pasta as I am, so he was a really good person to talk to. And then I ate Diana De Sensi's pasta at a restaurant she was working at called Montalto. And as soon as I tasted it, I said, I need to meet the person who made this pasta. And the book didn't really exist at that time, but I just did tuck away in the back of my mind, if I ever write a book about this, I need to learn from this woman. So I went to her house and we made pasta together. It was on her nonna's pasta machine, and she's a chef, so she certainly has those chefy elements, but it was very home style, the way she makes pasta at home, which is what I'm most interested in. And then I realised I didn't know enough about gluten-free pasta, and I wanted to have a gluten-free chapter, so I went to a couple of celiac chefs who have absolutely mastered gluten-free pasta, and now their recipes are in the book. And when I eat them next to regular pasta, I actually cannot taste the difference. They're that good. You know, gluten-free pasta has come that far. And then I love packet pasta, and I realised that there were some young people making packet pasta locally, and we didn't have to import it from Italy anymore. And so I went and met with them, and their pasta is delicious. And then finally, I wanted to meet with someone who teaches people how to make pasta. So I went to Paola Bacchia and found out from her how to teach someone how to do this. I made pasta alongside my nonna from a very young age. You know, I have the memory of turning the crank of the pasta machine. That's sort of a very early memory of mine. And I was certainly encouraged to help. I don't think I was a help at all. I'm sure I was an absolute hindrance. She would have done it much faster without me. But would pasta mean as much to me if I hadn't had that experience? You know, I don't think it would. So I do have very early memories, and I did have a nonna next to me, guiding me and instructing me from a young age. But then once Nonna died, I really just wanted to carry it on. So I just kept going and kept making it on my own. And without her there, I made some mistakes. Things went awry a few times. But then, you know, I got that groove back and started to sort of trust in myself. So the thing about the nonne, their approach to cooking is incredibly intuitive. You know, they're not weighing ingredients. It's all by touch and feel and smell. And they just trust that and they can fix it no matter what happens, no matter what conditions on the day are, they'll fix it and keep going. So I learned to trust in that and got better and better and better, I hope. If you don't have a nonna, I recommend doing a cooking class, a pasta class. There's some great people, including Paola Bacchia, who I mentioned in the book. But there's Pia Gava, there's many women, Italian women, sort of carrying on these traditions and being very willing to teach you. I hope my book would help, if I can say that. When I wrote the book, I really felt I wanted to be next to the person. I wanted it to feel like I'm next to you while you're making pasta, and I'm encouraging you, and I'm, you know, steadying you, and if you're feeling a bit nervous, and we're just getting through it, and we can be sort of together. We can enjoy sort of the miracle that is pasta, where you just take these very basic ingredients. It's either, you know, flour and eggs or flour and water, and we transform them into this really beautiful dish that you can do so many things with. So yeah, hopefully my book, but also if you are someone who learns by doing, and having a nonna next to you would be helpful, then a pasta class. This is the hardest question. Favourite pasta dish? It changes every day. I think my favourite stuffed pasta would be agnolotti del plin, which are those beautiful, they're almost raviolis, but they're cut, and it's got plin is a pinch, so they're sort of pinched at the sides. And I love stuffed pasta. It's it's probably the most complicated kind of pasta to make. A lot can go wrong, so don't start there. But if you're going to a restaurant, by all means, order it. But I also really love pappardelle. They're wide ribbons. I just think they're so elegant and beautiful and so delicious with so many different sauces. So that's my answer today. I'm a bookseller, which is something I love doing, and I feel so privileged to be a bookseller. I also edit other people's books and proofread them and work on them. And at the moment, I'm doing quite a lot of work as a developmental editor with people who aren't traditional writers, but are writing a book and need some guidance. And that's work I hope to do more of in the future. I'm finding that incredibly rewarding, to help someone find their voice, help them structure a narrative. That's very much what I love doing. So I'm loving that work. And what else do I do? I'm a gardener, I'm a cook, and I'm growing my garden in very big ways and trying to grow more and more vegetables and fruits. I've just planted a big orchard. So I've just read 2 books that have, it's such a cliche, but they've changed me. And that's a new book by Anne Michaels, and it's called Held. It comes out in November, and it's one of the most beautiful books I've ever read. And I'm currently halfway through Paul Auster's new book, Bortenberger. I think that's probably not how you say it. I haven't heard anyone say it yet, but it's a surname, and it's a book about grief and love, and it's incredibly beautiful. I almost missed my train stop because I was so immersed in it. It's truly spectacular. So those are 2 big literary releases coming out. But being busy with my book, I needed a lighter read last week, and I read the new Beth O'Leary called The Wake-Up Call. And that's a rom-com that's charming and delightful and summery, and I really enjoyed it. I don't know what's next. I hope to spend a lot of time talking about this book and I think a lot of people, when they write a book, they don't know if they're going to enjoy talking about the book. And I'm finding I'm loving talking about the book. So anyone will have me. I want to talk about this book. I want to talk about pasta. I want to make pasta. I want to show people pasta. So I'm going to focus on that for the short term. And then I do have an idea in the back of my mind that I might write a children's book next. I feel that's something I really want to do, and that's my background. That's what I started in children's books, and I feel I've got a kid's book in me next. Thank you so much for having me. This is just such a thrill.